Looks like you get a lot of writing.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, John. Been a while.
We're on air.
Oh, we're on air.
It's gonna be on video anyway, so.
It'll still be recorded, Mike.
She can capture off the,
Video.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to call a special meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order on Monday, February 27th, 2023 at 7:03 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. The prayer will be offered by City Clerk Dan Healy, and Alderman Tebow will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance.
Alderman O'Brien.
present.
Alderman Sullivan.
Here?
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Moran. Alderman Lopez. Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons. Alderwoman Kelly. Alderman Como. Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Govea. Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderman Tebow.
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons. Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
8 present, 7 absent.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the meeting over to the Chair of the Budget Review Committee, Alderman Dowd.
Okay, we do have a quorum, and Mayor and Attorney Bolton are not present. So tonight we have a public hearing on R 23-087, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $525,150 for the purchase of one new 850L crawler dozer for the Division of Public Works. Okay, before we have any testimony, Jeff LaFleur is online with a picture of a light vehicle sitting behind him. So, Mr. LaFleur.
Thank you, sir. Jeff LaFleur, Superintendent Solid Waste. This piece of equipment that we're looking to buy is one that we use daily at the landfill to cover our trash. By permit, we have to cover trash every day by 6 inches of soil. The dozer does it the best. It preserves airspace by getting it down to the 6 inches that we need to do. If we use the vehicle that's behind me, we can't get it down to the minute, inches that we need to save airspace. We usually use over a foot of material to cover the trash if we use a vehicle like the one behind me.
Okay. Any of the aldermen have any questions for Jeff? Seeing none, all right. And are you gonna stick around for the budget meeting right after this? Okay, very good. So now, I'd like to hear testimony in favor of R 23087. Seeing and hearing none, move on to testimony in opposition. Seeing and hearing none, move on once again to testimony in favor. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to testimony in opposition then. Seeing and hearing none. We'll close the public hearing on ordinance R 23087 at 7:06 p.m. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion that the February 27, 2023 special meeting of the Board of Aldermen be adjourned.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:06 p.m. And we'll go right into the budget as soon as people shifting seats. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Obie. Mike.
Coming.
Don't forget your name.
Oh. They don't know who I am by now.
Certainly know you in Concord.
The clerk tag is right in front there. It's over on that
Oh,
side.
right on
Yeah.
top, yeah.
He'll be the city clerk.
All set.
All set.
All right, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's February 27th, 2023, and it's 7:07 p.m., and we're in the Aldermanic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly. Alderman Ernest Jettie.
Here.
Alderman June Karen.
Here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien Sr. is present, and our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present. We have a quorum.
You have a quorum.
All right. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to give public comment? Mr. Smith, do you want to give an overview of the contract now?
If you wish.
Yeah, you can come up and say, you can either take a seat or whichever's more comfortable for you.
I sit all day long, so it feels good to stand. So this is for the custodial contract. It, last one expired in June 30th, 2021. So it's about a year and a half later. We concluded our negotiations this past December, reached tentative agreement middle of the month. Went through several red line copies back and forth, and then you have the final copy in front of you. This is a 4-year contract. The wage increase is 2.5% per year. So that's for most of the members of that union. The exceptions are the master plumber and the electrician. They get 22.5% raise starting this past July. You get 2.5 for the first year, then 22.5 thereafter, one time. So then after they get the one-time jump, it goes back to 2.5. The HVAC technicians get slightly more, 23%, one time, and that goes back to 2.5 after that. Reason we did that is just trouble hiring master electricians, master plumbers. I currently have no master plumbers at all. I've been without them since last summer. I have 2 master electricians, but one's been on the wounded list for 6 months, so it feels like he's been gone as well. The HVAC trade now requires a gas fitter's license, which is a pretty rigorous license to go out and get. I don't think it's quite the same level as a master license in electrical or plumbing, but it's getting up there. So that's why we increased them as well. I have been without an HVAC technician. I have 1 at each high school, and then I have 3 district-wide HVAC technicians. I've been down 1 since last summer. Other highlights of the changes, we did agree to extend short-term disability to entire union. So for those of you who've been here for a while, that we drew a line on November 1st, 2019, saying everybody that came in after that fact could not get short-term disability. They pushed hard for it to let everybody get, all those members plus all the new ones that joined after November 1st, 2019 to get it. We agreed to that. In return to that, there's a waiting period before you go on short-term disability that increased from 14 days to 21 days. So my main concern was absenteeism. I just want to make sure everybody's at work as much as possible. So that's why we increased it to 21 days, and they agreed to that. And last, there are a lot of little changes. I got 4 pages of tentative agreement stuff. It's mainly editorial things, minor changes here and there. But they also agreed to the healthcare program, which the city has offered them, which I think was a big get. Not as big as a teachers union, but it was good for this union.
All right.
So that's my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and if anybody has questions when we bring up the resolution, we'll call him back. Okay, any other public comment? Seeing none. Communications,
There are none.
unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-23-084, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the Nashville Board of Education and the Nashville School Custodian Union, Local 365, Council 90, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025, and related transfers. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion is to recommend final passage. It's Council 93. All right. Discussion. Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at, I'm curious just about staffing levels. At the bottom, at notes, it says HVAC electricians and plumbers, and in parentheses, it says 9. Is that 9 total across those 3 positions? And are we fully staffed? You did mention that you wanted to bump the pay, but are we fully staffed at that point, at this point?
Yeah, come on up. If it's easier, you can take a seat or you can do it from the podium.
If that's the only question, I'll just stand, but if you're gonna keep asking questions.
You might not be so lucky.
So, I think you're in, Alderman Sullivan, you're in one of the appendices. Is that where you're reading that from?
No, I'm just on the very first page, line 49 and 50. It says pay adjustment fiscal year 23 HVAC electricians and plumbers, and then in parentheses it says 9. So I'm assuming there's 123 employees in this union. 9 of which fall into those categories.
So if you'll indulge me, I'll use my fingers. So I got 2 electricians, 2 plumbers, that's 4, 1 HVAC at each of the 2 high schools, and then I get 3 more HVAC, so 9 is the total for
Okay.
HVAC, plumbers, and electricians.
Okay. And are we fully staffed?
That is, well, that's my full staff. I currently do not have 2 plumbers and 1 HVAC technician,
Okay. So you're down 3.
down 3.
Okay. One more follow-up.
Follow-up question?
Thank you. Of the, I'm going to assume the remaining 123 are various positions. How is the school district overall in staffing levels to that 123? Save the mention that, the 3-ish that you just mentioned, how are we doing overall?
Pretty well. There was a time, well, the pandemic is still ongoing somewhat. I would say last spring, we had some troubles getting people to apply for custodial positions. That seems to have resolved itself. And now we have an opening that's typically filled within a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. Very good. That's it for me. Thanks.
Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Smith, I'm looking at the contract analysis. Do you have,
I don't have that, but
oh, you don't?
something Mr. Dunman put together.
Okay, so I got a bunch of questions about that, so who can I ask that to? Maybe Mr. Griffin?
Good evening, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. With regard, as we go, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Donovan created that spreadsheet, and then I put in the medical, dental, and life insurance. But I'm familiar enough with that particular spreadsheet that if you wanted to ask questions, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, so do you have the spreadsheet?
I don't have a copy, but if you're gonna,
So I don't want to unfairly question you about it if you don't have it.
Here's Mike, okay.
I'm gonna sit down.
So these questions are just for clarification. Do you have it? So on line 2, it's got 2.5% across the board. What does that 2.5% refer to?
That would be the amount that Mr. Smith just indicated was the raise for the folks in this particular union.
Okay. So on line 10, it says real annual percentage increase over prior year. And for fiscal year 22, it's 2.5%. Then for 23, it's 4.5%. And then 24 and 25 are both 2.5%. What's the reason for that bump there?
Certainly, if we look at line 7, I believe Mr. Smith talked about one-time payments in fiscal '23 to attract and compensate fairly the members of that union. You'll see the $123,983.
Yes, I did.
That's added into the amount that brings the annual increase from about 130,000 to 240,000. The 240,000 divided by the 5.4 million is 4.5%.
Okay, thank you. And could I continue? And line 29, for retirement costs, for 22, it's got 19%. And then 23, 4.4%. Then it goes down to minus 0.2%. Then it goes back up to 2.5%. What's the reason for the big bump to 19%? That's just that many people retired in 22?
If I may, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, this is the New Hampshire retirement system that this particular union is a member of, like most other unions in the city. Just to explain this particular line item, this is the amount that the city pays on behalf of the employees for the employer cost portion. And believe it or not, in the out years, there's actually a reduction of about 2% in the employer rates. So that's why some of these numbers, that's why the increases went down.
Okay.
Looking at this, I'm not quite sure why the first number is 19% increase, but I could certainly check that out.
Does it have something to do with the increases in the 9 staff? Because their retirement would be increased as well.
The 9 staff, the one-time payment is in the following year, so I'd have to go through this a little bit more detail and get back to the committee if that would be okay.
Yep, that's
It
fine.
just doesn't jump out to me as to why that number would be.
We can get an answer before final passage of the full board.
Okay.
Just for clarification. Additional questions, Alderman Jennings?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify something Mr. Smith said. So when you said you have 9 and you're down 3, you really would be fully staffed at 12? Is that, or are you missing 3 and you have only 6 right now?
I only have 6 right now.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
The other important aspect of increasing this pay is we've just added 4 schools with brand-new high-vac equipment. Well, actually, McCarthy School isn't online yet, but it will be critical that we have people that know what they're doing to handle all that new equipment. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Griffin. Okay. So if there are no questions, the motion by Alderman O'Brien is to recommend final passage to the full board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I know you got a busy day tomorrow, so some of those other people in the union to do the plowing. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R-23-087, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $525,150 for the purchase of 1 new 850L crawler dozer for the Division of Public Works. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion is to recommend final passage. Are there any questions? And Mr. LaFleur is back on. If there are any questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Yes, thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Griffin for forwarding me the balance of the SURF fund, and then also a detailing of purchases that have been made so far in fiscal year 2023. The one question that I did have, because I was going through the record of expenses, and I see, forgive my ignorance, but I see trucks on there. And I wasn't sure if these trucks were for Public Works or if they were for another department, because when I cross-reference the SURF plan, when we went through budget approval, I don't see any of those trucks under Public Works. So I guess my question is, have these purchases that have been made so far this fiscal year, are those coming out of Public Works? Are these add-ons to what they had originally forecasted in the fiscal year 23 budget under the SURF plan?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, so what's coming out of the SURF account, first of all, we have purchase orders, so the purchase orders encumber the funds. So Alderman Sullivan is talking about is he notices that we've actually spent and purchased $779,000 worth of items out of SURF, and we have another 2 million that you folks have, in the Finance Committee have recently given the green light to go through the encumbrance process. So that's about 2,000,008. Now, that could be made up of items because of supply chain issues, et cetera, from fiscal 21, 22, and 23. And when you're looking at the SURF schedule, it could be police, fire, other departments in addition to Public Works.
Okay. So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is some of these purchases for vehicles could be out of Public Works. It seems like they are because there's plows on them and whatnot. So I'm assuming that, but these are not, they're not showing up in fiscal year 23 because of the delays in supply chain. So maybe they were slated to be bought in previous fiscal years, but now since the vehicles come online, they're able to buy it now.
That could be, especially over the last several years with the supply chain issues.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Just for clarification, the Park Rec has plows on their trucks, the school department has plows on their trucks, and there are trucks in the fire department and the police department. You all set?
Thank you for that.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, if I may, address just some of the comments that were made here. Being on fiscal, we had a number of items that came in, and you would see that it was originally on SURF maybe in fiscal 22 or 21, and some of those were deferred just to save money. And then what happened was, I know in the case of some of the Park and Recs items, they actually came in at almost double what we had put them on SURF for. And I know that they're now going through the SURF list to bring those prices up somewhere, I shouldn't say double, somewhere like anywhere from 8 to 10% over what we had budgeted for. And so we had a lot of those things come through. Some of those were, because we did defer the purchase, some of them was kind of red tape within City Hall. It went through Public Works and then it would come to Finance, which created a delay. So we've asked them to stop that practice and it'll come to Finance and Public Works at the same time, so we don't get some of these increases. Part of the problem is they're not guaranteeing us these prices like they did before. So we order it, we do this, and a year later, there's actually a price increase from when we've kind of ordered it to that. It's with this whole COVID and supply chain, it's really becoming a mess. And that's even something as simple, which I know it's not here for us to talk about, something as simple as the dog catcher's vehicle went from I think it was $30,000 up to $65,000 when we finally were able to buy it. So that's some of the issues that we're seeing now.
Just a couple other points. SURF doesn't really work
Right.
in connection with its name. If SURF were working correctly, the alderman and the mayor would put aside, if a vehicle had a 10-year lifespan, they'd put 1/10 of the replacement cost into the SURF account every year. And it's a long story why that was not done properly in past boards of aldermen, but there's not enough money in there to cover all the vehicles that we're talking about. The other thing is, because of the interest rates in the past few years, our most expensive vehicles are being bonded, which I'll let Mr. Griffin explain the difference between money coming out of SURF and bonds. And the other thing that's happening is the newest fire truck, the ladder truck that we're buying, or has that gone through yet? I think it has.
Yes, it has.
Yes, because it's gonna take 36 months for them to build it, which throws the SURF a little out of kilter. So the vehicles we're buying now are taking much longer, and that's why they're much more expensive. Do you want to address the bond versus the money out of SURF?
Sure, if I may. So this particular item is bonded because of the fact that it's supposed to last 7 years It's $500,000. The debt service on this particular piece of equipment is $85,000 a year, over 7 years. The debt service on purchases that solid waste has made is about $3 million a year. So it's gonna go from 3 million, this would add another 85,000. With regard to apparatus, and that's an important thing to know, it used to be less than a year to build it. Chief Buxton has informed me and the mayor that the 36, it could be up to 36. So the challenge we're gonna have is bonding things 3 years before we even get it. But bonding gives us the authorization to spend. It's not that we run out the next day and sell bonds. We basically have that in the queue to bond at some point. Chief Buxton has also indicated that there may be some payment plans that these builders have for us because they recognize the challenge of funding something potentially day one and not getting it for 3 years. But that's probably for another day. With regard to things on SURF, as Alderwoman Cleese mentioned, I'm on the hook to let you folks know at the Board of Aldermen level if something's more than 10%. I'm also on the hook, as you most recently had, we flip-flopped a 10-wheel dump truck that wasn't available for a 6-wheel dump truck. So it's a lot more, we have to be a lot more nimble and flexible as we go through this. 5 or 6 years ago, you print the schedule and that's the end of it, but now we've got challenges with pricing increases, et cetera. So this particular bond, it's part of our plan. As Alderman Sullivan asked, you know, what's the fund balance? Because he wants to know what's the fund balance, and it's $5 million at this point. But the payments will come out of debt service, out of the solid waste. They won't affect the balance in SURF. And that's the reason why we bond certain of the items. Why we put them in SURF is we want to capture them, that we actually need these vehicles and this apparatus and so forth going forward. So, but one more point on the SURF. When I arrived in 2010, they had just changed it from that. If something lasts 10 years, we'll fund 10%. Mathematically, it doesn't matter if you put enough money in every year. The fact of the matter is, and I hate to use the old spending cap because we're in the midst of that, but if you're trying to pay people, you want to keep the people we just talked about, and you want to pay, do other things, pay the benefits and the pension, something's gonna give, and it's the funding of SURF. You learned last year during the escrow process that we really, as Alderwoman Clee says, that the team gets together and they defer things. Pretty soon you got a log jam. That used to be $3 million a year is now $6 million a year. So you really have to be nimble on that as well. And we're going through that process right now. When we go through SURF, it will be, I believe, a little bit more rigorous this year than most years. But the hope is that, and we have an interesting dilemma here. We have a challenge that I'd like to speak about. We have a finance committee that essentially is put together to approve contracts. And most importantly, that the purchasing agent of the city, purchasing manager, is following the procurement process. That's why the communications come from Amy Gerard as opposed to anybody else. And then you have the Department of Public Works that, if I was on that committee, I'd be very interested in approving the actual purchase of the item. However, all those folks at the Public Works, they review the SURF list at the budget, and as late Alderman McCarthy tried to do, is not have a separate SURF committee, have the discussion in May and June of the SURF items. So number one, you know what they are. Number two, you know what the funding needs to be. And number three, it's not a mystery when we keep coming in with the SURF. I mean, it's kind of like Alderwoman Karen used to say, there's going to be a lot of expenses on trucks and heavy equipment because we need it, and there's also going to be a lot of expenses on wastewater because you need to spend. It's an expensive thing. So I just wanted to take the time to say, as we go forward to the next budget, we're going to have challenges of funding because we're at that point where inflation is kind of running rampant. Disappointed that it went up from last month. The bonding amounts they're not 2% anymore, so we gotta be careful there. And just things that cost of goods and services have gone up kind of all over the place, so that's a little bit of the background of why we're here and why I'm supporting what Mr. LaFleur and Director Foto are presenting here. And certainly we want to protect as much airspace as we can as we go forward through this process. So thank you.
A couple of things you and I have discussed, bringing those May meetings back about SURF and having a look at it before we get into the meat of the budget. The other point is, do we on a regular basis go into SURF and do we increase those vehicles every year with the cost of living? Or because if you don't do anything with the increases, when you get out to buy the equipment, that's why it's so far behind the price.
So a couple of things, Mr. Chairman, if I may. We always have had a 5% escalator. We've been very fortunate to buy most of the vehicles less than what we had in there with the 5% escalator. But obviously, if we need a 9% escalator plus the shortage of the actual parts to make the machinery and the availability, we've adjusted police, fire, just about every group, parking, every group. We've come up with a new base price that's significantly more than the last base price that we usually key off of.
I was pretty sure we did that. I just wanted to make that known for everybody.
Right, we did.
Oh, yes, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Mr. Griffin for going over that. Making that tough decision back with the escrow and putting that money back in SURF when we could have easily just put it back into the taxpayer, I think is why we had to make that tough decision. And because we're at points now where these vehicles are going up so much that we have to have money from somewhere. We can't bond every single vehicle that comes through. So I appreciate you going over that, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. LaFleur, just to clarify, the purchase of this dozer, this is a planned purchase. This is replacing something that's been in service and whose useful life is about to expire. Is that correct? Could you talk about that?
Correct, sir. Yes, we have a dozer currently at the landfill. We're starting to incur some pretty big expenses on repairing it. So this one replaces that. It's a 7-year-old dozer, and that piece of equipment's used daily, every day out there covering the trash, using side slopes. We use it heavily. It's a lot of back and forth with this piece of equipment. I am going to keep the other one, repair it, and have it as a backup to this one, because when the equipment's down for any amount of time, it makes it really difficult for us to cover trash properly. And as I said, it's very important to have it running, so we'll have one as a backup and this new one to run when we can.
So the other thing, Mr. LaFleur, you're going to be at some point here in the not too distant future working on phase 4, which is a pretty big, sizable amount of area, as we've seen.
Yes, sir.
And the other thing is, any equipment that we buy, having been in logistics for over 40 years, I can tell you it's a real issue with the military. As things get older, the spare parts become much more expensive because the companies don't want to build them. And then they come to a point where they're not available and have to be special ordered, which is even more expensive. So the repair of equipment that gets older is far more expensive than replacing the vehicle, the new one. So
Absolutely.
It's just the facts of life. So, any other questions, Alderman?
Follow up. The analysis that was provided to us says that this legislation should be referred to Board of Public Works for its review and approval. Has that been done yet or not?
I believe, yes, it went to Public Works last month, I believe.
Okay, so they've already reviewed this and authorized the purchase?
I've gone to Public Works and Finance for this machine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's been through the others.
It went to finance as well, yeah.
So, yeah, I just talked to Lisa this afternoon, so it should be all set. Any other questions? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 25-087, which is to buy the one new 850L crawler dozer for the Division of Public Works at $525,150. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee, there's none. General discussion? None. Public comment? None. Remarks by Alderman? None. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:41 PM.
Nice.